Okay, so it's a little afternoon. It's 4 days before Rosh Hashanah. Oh, I left the audio on the Twitch stream, so that's cool. And it's time for the nerd log. That was a pretty good start for me. I won't complain. We're talking about Errors Inbox. You have a competitor for most frequent guest, Adam, and that's Jemiah. I think it's like you got four, he's got six. But a frequent guest, we always love to have him, always helps the show out, always brings the funny. Adam Johnson is here. Adam, say hi to the people, tell them what you do for New Relic.
Hey everyone, I'm Adam Johnson, Principal Product Manager at New Relic. I work on Errors Inbox as well as synthetics and was formerly working on serverless. Yes, still love serverless.
Love it. Serverless, first in our hearts. We'll all be working for serverless someday. But yeah, so last you came on, we were talking about synthetics. We're talking about the system to automatically ping and monitor a whole range of the web services, which is interesting because on a separate segment, which you'll see linked in the YouTube notes, we were talking about using our new network monitoring where you're like running a Docker container that again is getting you synthetic metrics. All of this ends up at some point in some kind of information about errors. And so today we're going to talk about Errors Inbox in one of these ways of alert fatigue. You're trying to control the amount of information that we're getting.
Yes, exactly. I really like the discussion about alert fatigue because the experience around kind of looking at errors traditionally is that you have like a built-in kind of fatigue with errors as well. Like you look at all the errors, you see them all the time. Some errors are always going to be there and they're okay. Like some errors are good errors and some errors are bad errors. But like you mentally oftentimes have to remember all of the good errors and you're kind of scanning and looking for the bad errors or the new errors that you haven't like memorized yet. So we did a lot of work to create very simplified workflows that offload that for you. So you don't have to memorize error messages just to say, oh yeah, I looked at that like 3 months ago. That's a good error.
Yeah, no, this is something that I think people who are sort of new to an org often have been working maybe in a smaller shop or beginning developers really haven't had exposure to that. Once you've got 5 years under your belt, you really know well, which is that the errors, very much like logging, are a lot more about the culture of the space than they are kind of an absolute thing, right? Like, yes, there's HTTP errors. Those are supposed to represent something pretty standard. And no, you won't usually get a forbidden error when the actual error is you already bought those shoes, right? Like usually there's some consistency in some error codes, but when you're looking at all the errors that your system generates, they very often, like the difference between, hey, they tried to use a coupon code, but that coupon code is expired. That could be an error in your system. Very likely is an error in your system, right? May raise an error to this interface, but is not, no one should wake up in the night like, chief, people are trying to get 50% off for Labor Day and it's not Labor Day anymore, right? Like that's not like a DevOps should not be informed, right?
Yes, exactly.
So errors are cultural. Errors are very often express stuff that the person who wrote the service understands perfectly well, the person who maintains it may understand perfectly well, but they become this memory test, just like you're saying, of like, you remember this thing, which says, error code, coupon code error. Does that mean the coupon code service is down? Or does it mean, again, that they just used an expired code? Right. So this is an attempt to let you see that pattern quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the other side of it is that one of the tactics to avoid that like fatigue is to rely heavily on alert thresholds for error rates. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessary. I mean, that's okay for like paging systems and whatnot, but that is pretty limiting when it comes to delivering really like more perfect software, right? You can end up with errors that affect your users that aren't triggering a threshold. So you'll never get an alert off of those errors, but you as a developer probably are interested to know if the feature that you just like shipped is working as expected or not. And this is one way to help bubble up those errors as well without all of that noise.
Yeah, trying to alert off of an error rate, a threshold for error rate, is a pretty classic way to have a bad time at postmortem, right? Is for
Yeah.
someone to say, hey, we went to present for our series B, and this whole thing failed, and everywhere you click failed, but it was a quiet afternoon, so nobody even got an alert. Like, oh yeah, no, 1 out of 10 people not being able to check out from our storefront, that's fine. Ignore that, right? Like,
Right.
even if it's
No big
1%, it's
deal.
like, we would get this request back in support way back in the day with New Relic, which was like, there's a certain kind of pattern of at that time metric, not error, because we didn't even have events at the time. Um, and even one of it is bad. Even one, I want to wake up and it's really bad.
Yes.
It's like the checkout process at Boeing.com. It's like even one jumbo jet sold unsuccessfully is a serious problem at Boeing.com, right? Like, so yeah, so that alerting off rates. I mean, of course, use the strategy that works for you, but that probably doesn't make sense, right? So you want to use something like Errors Inbox, something a little bit smarter than that, hopefully, rather than just saying, hey, if an alert is fine, we should ignore it. If it's not fine, we should know about it in a certain way. Saying 10% of these things are alerting is probably not a winning strategy. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead with your demo. I didn't mean to go off on a
No,
tangent.
I think it's good to kind of set the scene a little bit. Now we kind of know like why error tracking and errors inbox is useful, and essentially like we're looking at this global errors inbox now, and kind of what we're showing here is that you're seeing all of the errors related to this workload here, Acme Telco e-commerce. You can select different workloads. If you're not familiar with workloads in New Relic, it's a really easy way to kind of group entities and services together. So if you're on a full stack development team that's building out, a shopping cart service, full with APIs, database, front end, serverless Lambda functions, maybe there's a mobile app component to that as well.
Yeah.
You can have all of that included in one workload. Go to the errors inbox for that workload, and you'll see all of the errors across all of those services in a singular place. And this is
just to make sure our language is consistent. Sorry to cut you off, but
yeah,
an entity and workload are both these like kind of generic sounding terms by design. Entity just means it makes metrics, and workload just means we have grouped together multiple entities. And yeah, your use cases are great, but yeah, it's not specific to Rails, it's not specific to Java, it's not specific to AWS, right? It's a very general concept of, hey, we know these are connected, usually because they're doing similar work, because they're doing connected work. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So, and today Errors Inbox supports APM, so that's a plethora of languages. We support mobile browser as well as Lambda functions that are instrumented using our Lambda layers or extension. So once everything is sending data to New Relic, you don't have to do anything other than just create a workload and then go to that workload. You'll start seeing the errors data. And the interesting thing is that we are analyzing all of the error events in our pipeline. We are then also looking and generating fingerprints off of those errors and normalizing the messages as well. So you'll see in this particular one, coupon not found with identity GUID. The actual error messages contain a GUID. We've stripped that out and as part of the fingerprinting process. And grouped all of those together, regardless of what that GUID is. So you don't end up with, 1,000 different coupon codes or whatever, generating 1,000 different errors. It's all grouped into one error.
Yeah. And so this is really strong, is that, when you have multiple, you have like entity ID or something here, those don't generate separate messages, right? Because we can say, hey, that's obviously just specific to the user. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you had like a username in your error message, we'll do the same with those, or emails, et cetera. So we do our best to normalize those out. And then once we've generated an error group, let's say it's an error we've never seen before, we create an error group. We start generating metrics for that. So you'll see like these occurrences over time. And then we also associate metadata with it. And I can jump into one of these errors so you can kind of see what is associated with that. The metrics for this, as well as the metadata for errors, are stored long-term as well, which is neat. So even if your raw error data has aged out, depending on what your data retention is, you'll still have the error group information available to you. And that's really useful because let's say you found an error, fixed it, resolved it, which I'll get into. Then like 3 months later, that same exact error occurred again. You're going to have a history of that. And you're going to be able to go in and see, oh, this happened 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Here's how it was fixed back then.
Yeah, the ability to add like a little comment to it is really, really strong. I think that I don't know how much this exists already for logs, but it's something that's kind of on my mind to talk about for logs as well, because yeah, the ability to just kind of mark like, hey, this is what this actually maybe means or maybe indicates is so useful. And the most likely person, right, to use your notes is you, right? The most likely person to use your note comments is you.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting to see how people use comments. Like some are using it to actually collaborate between each other. Some are using it just to store notes about a particular error. Yeah. So if they have an external wiki or knowledge base of some sort where they want to have a link handy to that, which contains all of the information about that particular error, they often put the link in there so you have access to that long term, so that 6 months later this error pops back up, you know exactly where to look for that. You don't have to hunt and peck, or even oftentimes you wouldn't even know if it happened in the past. So this gives you all of that right up front, right away what's going on, along with the activity stream, so you can kind of see who's interacted with it, how it's changed over time, etc. This is a demo, so a lot of activity on this one, getting bounced back and forth. Not a normal scenario, I would say.
Yeah, and this is sort of the other part that like beyond like commenting or trying to decorate a particular report, right? There's this state with errors inbox where it's like, hey, is anybody working on this? Has anybody noticed this? And sort of there's this piece of saying who's it assigned to or who's looking at it, is it resolved or not? Which is, again, it's much more about like team communication. But you have to, junior developers will ask like, what's the right way to handle this kind of thing, like a GitHub issue, or what's the right way to write a PR comment? It's like, well, you need to ask your team, right? Like, is it right to say, hey, I'm working on this, so I'm going to set this as resolved, right? Is it like, oh, no one's experiencing this error anymore, and that's only then was it resolved, right? Yeah. That's just going to depend on how your team communicates, and there's no single process that makes sense for everybody.
Exactly. So this is kind of the main view of this error detail. And I just wanted to point out, like, this, what you're seeing here is a single error occurrence in this group of errors. So you'll see there are 1,000. So you'll see this particular one is a browser error. So you'll see the stack trace coming from browser there. We do unminify those as well if you provide source maps. And you'll see all the attributes associated with that error. There's a lot of useful information in here, like the user agent OS, in the agent version. So you can see this is Chrome Linux 72. You can see custom attributes in here as well, like the username. So if you wanted to see which users are impacted, you could paginate through 1,000 of these and kind of look here. Yeah. But we thought that's not a great experience. Probably you just want to know what are the commonalities and what's the overall like breakdown of each of these attributes over time. So we built out attribute analysis in this tab to help you figure those things out. So if you wanted to see,
the thing at the top there is the thing I want to call out. Wait, stop your search. Undo the search. Give it back. I really like this thing that's at the very top. It's a subtle thing, but as somebody who worked in support for metrics for so long, the fact that you can say, hey, the most frequent value for this key is nothing, is so critical. Yes. Because it will prevent so many bad results where it's like, yes, hey, the most frequent organization ID is this. It must just be this organization. Okay, that's 2% of the values. Everybody else just doesn't have an organization set, right? That's right.
Yeah, exactly right.
Oh, that's so good. Okay. Well, do your search. Let's search some keys here.
Let's look at user. Oops, I can't type. Let's look at users. So if I'm curious, like which users have experienced this error, is this coming from like a single user or a bunch of users? That's often useful to know to figure out what's the blast radius of a particular error. You can, of course, see here synthetic user at acme.com is 58.6. But what about the other users? If you just click in on this, you'll get a table with all of the other users. In this case,
Oh, that's
really
nice.
just that user and then no value, and
Yeah.
then other. So it's a long tail essentially.
But yeah, if you see one user coming up in your 1,000 errors, is like they're half of them, is like maybe just call that guy and ask him to stop.
It might make their day to let them know, hey, I saw you had a really bad time. We fixed the error, and you should not run into that problem again. That provides a great level of customer service for sure.
I really strongly recommend. So these are custom attributes. This is not specific to error reporting. This is something you can do all over the place within New Relic to say, hey, this request has these attributes. And I really recommend that people think about them, and especially think about user and org IDs as something that you may want to report. User ID, this is complicated. Think about PII and stuff, and obviously, caveat, exercise some caution there. But org IDs so critical, because once you get to be a big distributed workload, the chances that a single organization is going to have something that its tables, its information that is causing you trouble is so high, especially if you're doing SaaS. It is so high. So take the time, just drop in that org ID, and I guarantee it'll save your butt, a year down the line.
100%. I also suggest like version as well. Whatever you can use to identify the version is going to be super helpful, because then you can just click in on that attribute, see the version distribution, and you'll be able to very quickly figure out when this error first started appearing, and if it's still appearing in the latest version or not. You'll be able to figure that out really quickly, without having to start digging through logs or finding charts of error rates and trying to correlate that. It's, you could figure it out, but this just makes it much easier. If all you got to do is, one line of code to start sending that data, basically.
Yeah, talk about being able to go back to sleep, right? When you're like, hey, this is a real serious problem, but it does not affect our newest version, right? It's like, they'll tell them to update. Good night. I mean, maybe you have to do more than that. Maybe you got to start sending letters, but at least right. And if it's not that, if it's, hey, it's multiple versions back and the current, then you can say, hey, let's go look at our commit history, right? Let's see, what we introduced for that version. Yeah, you're right. That would be I got to add that one to my list of like, yes, by default, you should be doing this kind of alerting, or this kind of attributing of your requests.
You also see, like, if you've enabled logs in context, you'll start seeing logs in line. So you don't have to jump to a separate view or product just to see the corresponding logs. You can see those all in line without changing the context, which is really helpful, because when we talk to developers debugging errors, a lot of times they don't necessarily have all of the answers, because they maybe haven't spent a lot of time with custom attributes, which maybe help them. But in those cases, they jump to the logs, and then going from an error into finding the relevant logs that correspond to the error is not always the easiest. It takes time. And then you've kind of lost your train of thought. So we try to put everything in line, in context, so that you don't have to do any of that yourself. We're just trying to make the workflow as seamless as possible.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that ability to say, hey, I'm going to add in this decoration without having to go and then add a bunch of stuff to my own code.
And then as we've talked about, you can assign errors. You can basically resolve or ignore these errors. So let's say like this coupon failed validation check. I don't really care about this. It happens all the time. I'm just going to ignore it. Now it's gone from this view. It's not gone forever. You can, of course, get it back by just switching the filter to ignored. And you'll see there's a couple ignored ones here. And let's say, oops, I made a mistake. I actually do want to see that one and stop ignoring that one. It's easy to just switch back and forth. And then as you've gone through and like fixed a particular error, you can go ahead and resolve those errors. What that's going to do is it removed it from the default filter. And if we see error events that match that fingerprint again, we'll automatically unresolve it, and you'll see it in the inbox again, as well as if you have notifications, you'll get a notification for that, which I haven't talked about, but I can jump into that next.
Yeah, that's it's new to me, that idea of that you can ignore as well. I mean, maybe it's been in errors inbox for a while, but I like that resolving means something a little more when ignore was also a possibility, right? Previously, something said to ignore, it's like, well, you were saying it's not something that's going to cause a problem.
Exactly. So there's this this account doesn't have permission to configure notifications, but we have Slack integration. So it's really easy to just enable notifications on a per inbox basis. So if you want to just say, every time we see a new error group or a resurfaced error group regression, I want to get a notification of that error in Slack. So you can basically just turn that on, select the Slack channel, and I'll show you what that actually looks like. This is what an actual Slack channel with real errors looks like. So you can see every few days you're going to get some errors popping in. These are new and resurfaced errors, and with this you can single click jump straight into the error details, see the stack trace, and start debugging it right away. And this is really useful for teams who want to very quickly, like within 2 seconds, see a new or resurfaced error. And that's useful for pre-prod, especially. So if you're doing active development or have staging environments, it's really useful to start sending that data to New Relic and integrating that with Errors Inbox and getting notifications, so that the second you push to staging, you want to know if there are new errors in that version. This is going to tell you right away. It's going to show you exactly which errors they are, and it's going to let you really quickly triage those so you can get them fixed before you push to prod, so that users aren't actually seeing those errors. Fix those errors before they get to prod.
Yeah, resurfacing is a big one, right? Is to say, if we can make notes and say how we resolved something in the past, then we can take a look again. And lots of errors really are, because there's something like caused by like syncope. They are not. It's not just a simple, hey, that's permanently resolved by making some code update, right?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I was go ahead, and then I can jump to the next thing.
No, that was what I was saying. Like, let's get we're not going to create notifications because it makes sense that admin accounts are often required to create notifications because we don't want everybody in a place sending a million notifications everywhere, which we don't have enabled in our demo environment. But yeah, let's look at the next thing.
Yeah. So let's say that you're not using workloads, or you don't have the ability to create workloads, or you're just really working on like a single service and you don't care about the multi-service. By the way, it's also multi-account view. So if you do have a lot of sub-accounts and or parent-child accounts in New Relic, you're able to see all of that in a single view. But let's say you just have a single service or entity that you care about. We just today launched Errors Inbox inside APM. So you'll see now this new triage section. And this is the APM summary view. If you click right into that, you're going to get a scoped version of that inbox directly inside APM without setting anything up. So you don't have to send us new data. You don't have to do any configuration. It just works out of the box. And you get the same assigning, status changing, triaging, commenting abilities. You get the attribute analysis. All of it is included for you. So that's just another way to consume Errors Inbox.
I really, really like that. So how kind of did this get? Why wasn't it always part of? Am I dumb? Something's not. I'm not understanding. I think so. Application performance monitoring. You're monitoring application. Of course, it's like giving you a bunch of errors. We have Errors Inbox. Why was it not? It's just kind of a UI thing, or like is a data connection being added here? Help me understand that.
We wanted to start with the cross-account, cross-entity view, because we know that teams often work on multiple services at once, and they very much wanted to have a singular place to see all of their errors. We also found that some users prefer to just have a much more narrowly scoped view if they're focusing on that single service. While you can do that with filtering in Errors Inbox, it has like some extra hurdles of like needing to set up a workload in order to get there. So based on that feedback, we came up with the thought of, well, why don't we also include it in APM? Maybe it was an obvious thing, but
no, I get it. I see now, right? Like normally we might, for errors, we might just look all over a system or in a whole workload. And so in this case, we're sort of zooming in a little bit more to a single application.
Exactly. Yeah. And the cool thing is that like normally with the other errors experiences, you're limited to just the data retention of those error events. Once those age out, those errors don't show up anymore. But since we're storing those long term, I can go back 6 months and very quickly see, here's all the errors over 6 months for this particular service. And it loaded extremely quickly, which is pretty cool, to be able to see those trends at a really high level for this particular service.
I see. Yeah, I really think that ability to get that kind of 10,000 feet view is pretty powerful. So, Adam, what else do you want to show us about Errors Inbox? It's a definitely cleaner experience, and I love the depth we can get to in a single error. But what else do you want us to look at?
I have stuff that I want to show that's not yet released, but coming maybe next week. Probably next week we'll be releasing, and by the time the YouTube video is out, so I can at least talk to it today.
It's a bummer to say, but I think I might have to have you back on the show.
I can do that. I gotta get that record. So
yeah, you gotta come from Jemiah. I can't organize a conference every month.
we have a lot of really awesome stuff coming down the line in Errors Inbox. The team has been working extremely hard, and we have a very exciting roadmap of stuff now that we kind of have the base fundamentals of error tracking in place. We're looking at how do we improve the integrations with third-party tools, and how do we get more out of all of the rich data that New Relic has in order to make the whole debugging and triaging experience easier. And so we have some really quite exciting stuff coming down the line. So I'd be happy to come back and talk about those things.
I love that. Okay. So we got more stuff coming out. I love the greater depth. You can follow Adam on Twitter. There's a link in the Twitter chat, Twitch chat. Oh my gosh, I haven't looked at Twitch chat in a minute and a half. And I know someone's been like screaming, like, please recognize me, hear my voice, hear my silent cry. I'm gonna go check Twitch chat right now, because maybe there's a final question I want to answer it.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, chat. Forgive me. I'm so sorry, chat. See, there's my audio coming in. We found the errors inbox. Oh, okay. Here's the one comment, and it's a good one. We found the errors inbox so helpful that we've already integrated into our team's processes. Really awesome job, guys. I wish we had responded to that right when it came in.
Yeah, I love it.
4 minutes ago. But hey, that's my pencils on erasers.
I'd love to get feedback from users who are using it as well. So any kind of feature wish lists you have, send them my way.
Yeah, the feedback button up at the top right is a really great way to just kind of say, hey, I have notes on this. And if you're ever excited to like, hey, I like this so much, I want to come talk about it on your show, let us know, because we would love to hear just how you're using it, what you'd like to see it change, because for all the data we do have, anecdotal data from a user is the best. So we want to hear that. All right. Folks, do check out the Nerd Log every Thursday. Check us out the other videos on YouTube. We've got other stuff about Errors Inbox, other stuff about alerts and AI connected in the show notes. You'll see documentation of using Errors Inbox down below. Otherwise, any other stuff we want to plug, Adam, for the next couple of weeks?
Well, next week we're going to be launching Jira integration. So you'll be able to, with basically 2 clicks, automatically create a Jira ticket off of any of your errors. And that's going to be available in both this APM Errors Inbox view as well as the global view. So that's super exciting, heavily requested feature. Coming out any day now.
That's going to be really nice. Okay, I'm looking forward to that. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to let producer Ali play us out.